Coming up on Arirang News, stricter social distancing takes effect in the greater Seoul area as South Korea battles a third wave of COVID-19. Bars and clubs have to close while restaurants are only takeaway after 9 p.m. Consumer sentiment in South Korea is up in November on growing hopes for a vaccine, though the latest figure does not take into account the recent resurgence of the virus. And data show 1 in 6 married women in South Korea is on a break from her career because of family issues, mainly childcare. The number is coming down, though, because fewer women are having children. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has seen its new daily COVID-19 cases climb back into the 300s, intensifying concerns about this third wave we're experiencing. Given the spike in infections in Seoul, the capital area is seeing a lot of changes, going up a notch in terms of social distancing. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea reported 349 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, of which 320 were local transmissions. This is nearly 80 more cases than the previous day, which has seen the numbers briefly drop below 300. Experts say this latest rise in cases is yet another sign that the country is expecting a large outbreak. Clusters across the nation continue to report additional cases, and with more results to come from many of these clusters, additional cases linked to these clusters are expected. Most of the local transmissions came from the capital area, which started level 2 distancing on Tuesday, the third highest level in its 5-tier scheme. Under those level 2 measures, 5 types of nightlife venues will be subject to bans on gatherings. Singing rooms must be closed after 9 p.m. Restaurants can invite customers to sit in until 9 p.m. but can only provide takeout and delivery afterwards. Cafes, including non-franchise ones, will only be able to provide takeout and delivery services at all times. Wedding and funeral venues will be limited to less than 100 people, and religious activities will have their capacity kept at 20%. Theaters and concert halls are required to seat audience members apart from one another, with food consumption strictly prohibited. And indoor sports facilities are required to halt operations after 9 p.m. A one-strike rule could halt business operations for just a single violation, with a fine of up to around 3 million Korean won or around $2,700. Kindergartens, primary schools, and middle schools will have to keep their attendance kept at 1/3, while high schools will be limited to 2/3. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And with social distancing at level 2, South Korean military service members in the greater Seoul area are now in most cases prohibited from taking leave. The Defense Ministry said the rule will be in place for 2 weeks. The military, it says, will allow one-day trips to areas where there have been no confirmed COVID-19 cases for a week, but only with the permission of a commanding officer. On-base religious facilities will only be allowed to operate at 1/5 capacity. South Korea's Drug Safety Ministry has given approval to local drug makers to go ahead with clinical trials of coronavirus vaccine and treatment candidates. With that announcement on Tuesday, SK Bioscience said it will conduct a phase 1 trial of the vaccine candidate NBP 2001 to evaluate its safety and efficacy in healthy adults. The vaccine has already been found safe and effective in animal testing. The Drug Ministry has also approved a phase 2 clinical trial of a new COVID-19 treatment by Donghua Farm. The U.S. government will now start cooperating with President-elect Joe Biden and his officials to prepare for a transition to a new administration. After waiting to do so for a few weeks, the General Services Administration has acknowledged Biden as the winner of the election earlier this month, which frees up money and other resources for the transition process. Kim Yeon-sung reports.
A major breakthrough after a weeks-long deadlock. The General Services Administration, or GSA for short, acknowledged on Monday President Trump's defeat for the first time, more than 2 weeks after Biden was called as a winner. GSA head Emily Murphy sent a letter to Biden, which permits the Trump administration to coordinate with the incoming Biden team and provides millions of dollars in government funds for the transition. Murphy delayed sending the ascertainment of Biden's victory for a few weeks later than usual, but she asserted the delay was not fueled by any favoritism. Murphy's latest change of course came shortly after Michigan formally certified its election results in favor of Biden. Pennsylvania is also nearing certification as well. President Trump responded cordially to Murphy's decision. He tweeted that he thanked Murphy for her steadfast dedication and loyalty to the country. But he also maintained his position by adding his team needs to do what's necessary with regards to initial protocols and insisted his legal fight continues and his team has a strong case. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea's consumer sentiment has improved in November thanks largely to the release of suppressed demand and hope for a working COVID-19 vaccine. According to the Bank of Korea, the composite consumer sentiment index for this month is at 97.9, up 6.3 points from October. The survey, however, does not include this week's raising of the social distancing level to 2. The reading is still below the threshold of 100, so more people are pessimistic than optimistic about the economy. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, a global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, stocks on Wall Street overnight closed higher as more good news comes out about vaccine trials. The Dow is up more than 1%. What was the story on Wall Street?
Yes, if you look at Dow Jones, it gained about 1.1%. S&P 500 rose about 0.6%. And NASDAQ was the weakest of rise, but it did rise by about 0.2%. And particularly the small mid-caps rose. The Russell 2000 was up almost 1.9%. So clearly there is a possibility that economic recovery might be coming soon, and investors are actually betting on that case. The reason why that people believe that economic recovery will be coming is because of the vaccine news. The COVID-19 vaccine news outweighs the rising infection at the current point in time. The AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford have said that their trial was 90% effective. Slightly lower than the previous ones by Moderna and Pfizer, but nevertheless, it seems that all these vaccines are coming out in a case where that actually the COVID-19 issue will be dying out by next year sometime this time. So clearly, the positive news is that the vaccine will be able to result into a much better economic recovery coming through in the first quarter or second quarter of next year. So even though there's a huge rise of the new infected, but that is not going to be, people are not looking at that as an issue, but rather what will look like in next 6 to 12 month period. So if that's the case, then we think that there is more room for equity market to rise. It seems that is affecting overall global market as well. So most of the countries are all breaking the record high of the index levels these days in the past several weeks.
The same case here in Korea. Yesterday, the Kospi crossed over 2,600 points, and today it's up again for the 5th session in a row, another all-time high. What's your analysis of the local market?
Yes, as you said, Korea now has reached well above 2,600 Kospi level. The previous peak was 2,607, 2018, and also on the closing, it was actually below 1,600. But yesterday it closed above 2,602, and also today it's up again by about 0.58%. So clearly, it's breaking the record. As for the Kosdaq, however, though, it was slightly down by 0.14%. But all in all, what we're looking at is that the Korea's consumers' confidence is improving, and it has increased to 97.9 points, still below 100, but nevertheless, we are seeing the recovery. Yes, some people are concerned that the social distancing will be going up to level 2, and that will result into some possibility of consumption decline. But in reality, we think that the online consumption is the most important factor, and that number is continuing to show a very significant rise YOY. And if that's the case, we think that the level of the consumption slowdown is not going to be significant enough that Korea will go into the double dip territories. If that's the case, we think that there is more room for Kospi as well as the Kosdaq to rise in the future. If you look at the valuation-wise, we estimate that the fair value of Kospi to be around 2,900, and Kosdaq to be around 1,004. So clearly there's probably another 10% plus upside potential for Kospi. And the foreign investors continue to be the buyer of Korean market, and this trend should continue in the future.
Well, now, Korea has been taking on more and more debt, and that's true for the government, corporations, and households. Household debt, though, is at a record high and grew in the third quarter by the most since April 2016. Why is debt rising so fast, and what's the significance of this in your view?
Right. If you look at the overall debt, Korea is about 240%. That is including the household, the corporate, and the government. And that 240% is actually relatively small than most of other countries because it is estimated to be around 365% at the end of this year for the global as a whole. So clearly, Korea is more than 120 percentage points lower. So it's not an issue as far as the total debt is concerned. But yes, as you said, the concern is in the area of the consumer debt. And the consumer debt amounts to about 97% of the total GDP, which is much higher than the global average. And if you look at the U.S., it is around 70% territories. And if you look at China, and it is also below 70% territory. So Korea being close to 100%, that is the highest, and that is the big concern. The reason for that is because obviously Korea is much more dependent on export in terms of the GDP numbers, and the domestic consumption level is already to the full level. And because of that, we think that the Korea is a bit much more sensitive to the global economic condition than the domestic economic condition. So having said that, we think that the Korean economy will grow quite reasonably with the global economy recovering due to the vaccine, and 2021 is looking good. But in terms of if the double dip actually happens in global case, then Korea will be suffering the most. I don't think that will happen, but nevertheless, that's something that to be cautious about. All in all, we think that Korea is in a good position because the global economy is in a good position.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
The South Korean government is holding an exhibition to highlight the ways it has encouraged innovation over the past 3 years under President Moon Jae-in. It's an online event held under the slogan, "Innovation Done Together, a Future Open Together." Visitors can explore policies like smart customs services, which have made it easy to buy things from overseas. Also tax services provided through mobile devices. And of course, the innovative ways in which South Korea has fought against COVID-19. In his congratulatory message, President Moon pledged that government innovation will continue to be a key part of the fight against the pandemic. There's also a live show every day on the site at 2 p.m. Data show 1 in 6 married women in South Korea is currently taking a break from her career, mostly because of the need to take care of children. Actually, the number of women taking a break from work this year has declined by about 11% compared to last year, but that's in large part because fewer women are getting married and having babies. Ji-young has more.
Even though she doesn't have a job outside the home, Jung Ah-rim says she has no time to rest because she's taking care of her 2 children.
I think all moms feel the same. Even though it's tiring, I'm taking care of my children myself because I feel that it's safer.
1 in 6 married women in South Korea between the ages of 15 and 54 say they're currently on a break from work because of family issues. According to data released Tuesday by Statistics Korea, roughly 8.58 million women were married as of April this year, and among them, 3.42 million were not employed. Among those not employed, 1.51 million women were not working because of family issues, which is about 18% of all married women. However, the number of women whose careers have been interrupted decreased by more than 11% compared to the same period last year.
The number of women with interrupted careers is declining in part due to the government's efforts to balance home and work, measures including flexible work time and maternity leave. But it is mostly because of the decline in the number of marriages and childbirth.
The official added that the pandemic had little to do with this figure because it does not include the women who lost their jobs because of the COVID-19 economic crisis. The biggest cause of an interrupted career is childcare, followed by marriage and pregnancy.
I cannot leave my children unattended. Kids at the ages of 6 and 2 need their mom.
Among women with interrupted careers, almost 61% of them had children under the age of 6, and almost 60% of them had more than one child. The biggest proportion of these women were those between the ages of 30 and 39 at about 28%. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The police in South Korea are urging people to be careful when riding electric scooters, with the rules on riding them set to be eased next month. From December 10th, the age for riding e-scooters will be lowered to 13, and you won't need to wear a helmet. Until now, riders had to be at least 16, wear a helmet, and have a motorcycle license. The new rules, however, also require scooters to be ridden either on bicycle paths or on the right edge of the road. And if you hit a pedestrian, you could face up to 5 years in prison or a fine of 20 million won, which is almost 18,000 US dollars. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.